When Jim Brown played, defenses had one goal: stop him. Most failed. He ran with a power and relentlessness that made him nearly untouchable, earning his place as one of the greatest to ever step on a football field. However, even for Brown, there was one player who stood out, a rival tough enough to leave a lasting impression. Decades later, at 87, he's finally sharing the truth. The name he reveals might surprise you, and the story behind it says everything about how deep this rivalry went. But before we get there, let's take it back to where it all started. Jim Brown's journey began on St. Simon's Island, a small stretch of land off the coast of Georgia, where he was born on February 17, 1936. Life there, however, was anything but simple. His father, a boxer, walked out when Jim was only 2 months old and never returned. Not long after, his mother left as well, taking a job as a maid in Manhasset, New York. That meant the earliest years of his childhood were spent in the care of his great-grandmother, who became the central figure in his upbringing. At 8 years old, his mother finally sent for him, and Jim moved north to New York. The adjustment was far from smooth, but over time he began to find his rhythm. One of his earliest memories from school revealed just how different life was in Manhasset compared to Georgia. After a confrontation on the playground, he quickly learned that the way boys fought up north wasn't the same as what he knew back home. That moment stuck with him, shaping how he navigated this new world. At Manhasset High School, Jim Brown didn't just play sports. He redefined what it meant to be an athlete. He excelled in baseball, basketball, track, and most famously, lacrosse, a sport with roots in Native American traditions dating back centuries. His speed, strength, and toughness made him a force in every game he touched. On the basketball court, he averaged an astonishing 38 points per game, while on the football field, he tore through defenses, averaging nearly 15 yards per carry as a senior. By the time he moved on to college, it was already clear Jim Brown wasn't just another athlete, he was destined to be a legend. Jim Brown chose to stay close to home for college, enrolling at Syracuse University. His path there was made possible largely through the efforts of Kenneth Malloy, a lawyer and former Syracuse lacrosse star who had mentored him at Manhasset. Malloy pushed hard for Syracuse to admit Brown, despite the university's reluctance to bring in black athletes. Even then, Brown's freshman year in 1953 was far from easy. He was the only African-American player on the football team, and though he had been promised a scholarship, the school failed to honor that commitment. Malloy stepped in personally, paying tuition and rallying funds to keep Brown enrolled. At Syracuse, Brown endured open racism. He was forced to live in a non-athlete dorm, warned against dating white women, and even had coaches experiment with him at different positions, as if unsure how to use his talent. Despite this, his performance on the field spoke louder than any prejudice. By his sophomore season, he was already the team's second leading rusher. In his junior year, he racked up 676 yards at 5.2 yards per carry. And in 1956, his senior season, he delivered one of the greatest performances in college football history. Brown became a consensus All-American, finished 5th in the Heisman Trophy voting, and set school records that still resonate: a 6.2-yard rushing average and 6 rushing touchdowns in a single game. He ran for 986 yards in only 8 games and scored 14 touchdowns. His finale against Colgate was legendary: 197 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns, and 7 extra points. An NCAA record 43 points in a single game. Even in defeat at the Cotton Bowl, he dominated with 132 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. But football was only one piece of his story. Brown was a true multi-sport athlete. He lettered in basketball and track, finishing 5th in the decathlon at the 1955 USA Outdoor Track and Field Championships. On the hardwood, he averaged double-digit points, and in lacrosse, he was a game changer. By his senior year, he had scored 43 goals in 10 games, tied for first in national scoring, and became a first-team All-American. His dominance in lacrosse was so complete that the rules of the game were altered to prevent players from carrying the ball too close to their bodies, changes made specifically because of him. His legacy in the sport is immortalized in the Lacrosse Hall of Fame and honored inside the JMA Wireless Dome, where a tapestry celebrates him as the greatest player ever. Beyond sports, Brown also dedicated himself to service. At Syracuse, he joined the Reserve Officers Training Corps, and by the time he graduated, he was stepping into a new role as a commissioned second lieutenant. Now, all of Jim Brown's dominance on the college football field made the NFL take notice. In 1957, the Cleveland Browns drafted him with the 6th overall pick, and he wasted no time proving why. By his 9th game, he erupted for 237 rushing yards against the Los Angeles Rams, a performance that shattered the single-game rushing record. That mark stood for 16 years until O.J. Simpson broke it, and it remained the rookie record for 4 decades. Brown closed out his rookie year with 942 rushing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, and 1 receiving score. The very next season, he reset the NFL single-season rushing record with 1,527 yards, a feat he would top again in 1963. At that time, the NFL season was only 12 games long, which makes his numbers even more staggering. In 1958, his 1,527 rushing yards demolished the old record of 1,146 set by Steve Van Buren in 1949. That year, he also scored 18 total touchdowns. By 1964, the Browns were contenders again, with Brown rushing for 1,446 yards and averaging over 5 yards per carry, and with rookie wide receiver Paul Warfield joining quarterback Frank Ryan, Cleveland had a dangerous balance of power and speed. Ryan threw for more than 2,400 yards. Warfield hauled in 9 touchdowns, and together with Brown, they carried the team to the NFL championship against the Baltimore Colts. The Colts were heavy favorites, boasting a 12-2 record and led by Johnny Unitas, Lenny Moore, and John Mackey. But Cleveland stunned them. Brown rushed for 114 yards, Ryan threw 3 touchdowns to Gary Collins, and the Browns shut out Baltimore 27-0 to claim their first championship since 1955. Brown's last season came in 1965. Cleveland went 11-3 and returned to the title game. But the Green Bay Packers held Brown to just 50 rushing yards and took the crown 23-12. Even so, Brown's individual numbers remained untouchable. The only time he fell short of 1,000 rushing yards besides his rookie season was in 1962, when he finished with 996. But you see, just before the 1964 season, Jim Brown made a bold move into Hollywood, landing a role in the film Rio Conchos as a Buffalo Soldier. When the movie premiered in Cleveland, he and several teammates showed up to watch it. The critics didn't hold back. Most panned the film itself. But here's the twist. While the movie flopped in their eyes, many admitted that Brown's performance actually held up, hinting that football might not be the only stage where he could shine. By early 1966, Brown was already back in front of the cameras, this time for The Dirty Dozen, a World War II story about a group of convicts sent on a dangerous mission before D-Day. The shoot dragged on because of poor weather, and suddenly Brown faced a dilemma. The delays threatened to push into Brown's training camp, and that immediately caught the attention of team owner Art Medell. Medell issued a firm ultimatum. He made it clear that no veteran players, not even Jim Brown, would be allowed to report late. If Brown wasn't at camp by July 17th, Medell vowed to fine him and suspend him without pay. It was his way of proving he meant business. But Brown wasn't interested in a standoff. He had already hinted that 1966 would be his last season. And now, standing on the set of The Dirty Dozen in London, he made his choice. He retired from football, walking away at just 30 years old, right at the peak of his career. By the time he retired after 9 seasons, he owned nearly every rushing record in the books. His 1,863 yards in 1963 set the single-season record, and his 12,312 career rushing yards, 106 rushing touchdowns, and 126 total touchdowns placed him at the top of the all-time lists. He also held the record for most all-purpose yards at 15,549. Brown led the league in rushing 8 times, and to this day remains the only player to average over 100 rushing yards per game for a career, sitting at 104.3. His final appearance came in the 1966 Pro Bowl, where he scored 3 touchdowns. The shocking part was that he retired at his peak, coming off a season with 1,544 rushing yards, 21 total touchdowns, an MVP award, and another championship appearance. Fans and even his teammates couldn't quite wrap their heads around it. Why would Jim Brown walk away at his peak? Later, Brown explained it himself. Football, as great as it was, just wasn't enough. He wanted something deeper, more mentally stimulating, and he felt a calling to be part of the bigger social battles happening in the country. He admitted there was some regret in leaving the game, but never sorrow, because he knew he was stepping into something larger than sports. At just 30 years old, Jim Brown walked away from sports for the first time in his life. But stepping off the field didn't mean slowing down. He quickly shifted his focus to Hollywood. In the same year he filmed The Dirty Dozen, he also landed a role on the TV series I Spy. By the following year, he was taking on bigger projects with films like Ice Station Zebra, Dark of the Sun, and The Split. When the 1970s arrived, Brown became a familiar face in the wave of blaxploitation films. These movies, which centered around black characters and often carried bold, gritty storylines, were both celebrated and criticized. Supporters loved seeing black actors in leading roles, while critics argued the films leaned too heavily on stereotypes. Brown didn't let the debate slow him down. He starred in at least half a dozen films in the genre before it faded out in the mid-70s. Over the next few decades, Brown continued to build his presence in film and television. Audiences saw him as Fireball in Arnold Schwarzenegger's The Running Man, and as Slammer in the comedy I'm Gonna Get You Suka, both in the late 1980s. Before the century closed, he appeared as Coach Montezuma Monroe alongside Al Pacino in Any Given Sunday. As time passed, his roles became less frequent, but his mark on Hollywood remained undeniable. But even with his growing presence in movies and television, Jim never really left sports behind. In 1978, he joined the CBS broadcast booth, teaming up with the legendary Vin Scully and former coach George Allen as a color analyst. His voice carried the same authority on the mic as it once did on the field. Brown didn't stop there. He called boxing matches on TV and later lent his presence to the early days of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Then, in 1983, Brown grabbed headlines once again with an announcement that stunned the sports world. He was making an NFL comeback. The fact that he had been retired for 17 years didn't seem to matter. His motivation was personal. Franco Harris was climbing the all-time rushing leaderboard, and Brown, who disliked Harris's habit of stepping out of bounds to avoid hits, felt that record should never fall to him. Known for his bruising, straight-ahead style, Brown signed with the Los Angeles Raiders determined to protect his legacy, even though he never played a down. The tension between Brown and Harris eventually spilled into a nationally televised 40-yard dash. Brown, at 47, faced off against Harris, who was 34. The result wasn't close. Harris ran it in 5.16 seconds, while Brown clocked 5.72. Still, Brown's connection to sports continued long after. In 2008, he became an executive advisor for the Cleveland Browns, helping foster relationships with players and supporting team programs. By 2012, he returned to his lacrosse roots, becoming a part owner of the New York Lizards in Major League Lacrosse. The following year, he added yet another chapter, taking on the role of special advisor once again with the Cleveland Browns. Now, not all of Jim Brown's headlines were about football glory. Off the field, his personal life was often troubled. In 1968, his first wife, Sue, filed for divorce after 9 years of marriage, calling him grossly neglectful. The couple had 3 children, Kim, Kevin, and James Jr., and the split left Brown responsible for alimony and child support. Even before the divorce, his private life had drawn public scrutiny. In 1965, he was arrested in a hotel room on charges of assault and battery against an 18-year-old named Brenda Ayers, though he was acquitted. A year later, Ayers accused him of fathering her child, a claim Brown denied. Then, in 1968, another scandal broke when model Eva Bone Chin was found injured beneath the balcony of Brown's apartment. She had been in a heated argument with him over his affair with Gloria Steinem. Prosecutors charged him with assault with intent to commit murder, but the case collapsed when Bone Chin refused to cooperate. Brown paid a $300 fine, not for that incident, but for striking a deputy sheriff during the investigation. Later, Brown admitted he had slapped women in the past, including Bone Chin, acknowledging that it was wrong and that he should have shown more control. Still, his troubles continued. In 1969, he was charged in a road rage case but was later acquitted. In the mid-1970s, he was fined and given probation for beating a golfing partner. The 1980s brought even more headlines, including a dismissed sexual assault case in 1985 and an arrest the following year for assaulting his fiancée, Deborah Clark, who chose not to press charges. By 1989, Brown's views on women stirred controversy of their own. Promoting his memoir, he described his preference for younger women with troubling comparisons that drew heavy criticism. In 1997, he remarried, this time to Monique Brown, but within 2 years, he was arrested again for making threats against her and vandalizing her car. The court sentenced him to probation, counseling, community service, and fines. But Brown ignored most of those requirements. By 2000, he was sentenced to 6 months in jail, though he ultimately served only half that time. Years later, Brown reflected on his past in an interview, admitting he had made serious mistakes in his treatment of women and expressing regret, even if he did not escape accountability for the harm he caused. But while Jim Brown's personal relationships with women often stirred controversy, he channeled much of his focus into uplifting young black men and minority communities. During his playing days in Cleveland, he founded the Negro Industrial Economic Union, later renamed the Black Economic Union, or BEU. Through this organization, Brown brought together professional athletes as role models, using their influence to fuel black-owned businesses, athletic clubs, and youth programs. Not long after he retired, Brown helped organize what became one of the most important meetings in sports and civil rights history. In 1967, he brought together Lou Alcindor, later known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell, and several other prominent black athletes at BEU headquarters in Cleveland. Their goal was to discuss Muhammad Ali's refusal to join the military during the Vietnam War. Promoter Bob Arum had tried to broker a deal with the government. If Ali agreed to serve by boxing for U.S. troops, his draft evasion charges would be dropped. Some in the room had personal financial reasons for wanting Ali to take the offer. Ali refused. He would not compromise his religious beliefs or his stand against the war. Instead of walking away frustrated, the athletes left with a new respect for Ali's courage. What started as an attempt to persuade him turned into a powerful moment of solidarity, later known as the Ali Summit. Although the BEU eventually folded, Brown carried its spirit forward. He connected the model to other initiatives like the Coors Golden Door program and Jobs Plus. In 1986, he founded Vital Issues, a program aimed at inner-city gang members and prison inmates. 2 years later, it evolved into A Mayor I Can, an organization dedicated to teaching life management skills, building self-confidence, and guiding people towards stability and success. From his Los Angeles home, Brown could often be found mentoring members face-to-face, stressing that many problems facing young black men come from a lack of personal development and self-esteem. In 1992, A Mayor I Can received a $1 million grant to expand its reach into cities like San Francisco and Cleveland. Alongside that work, Brown also launched Ocean Productions in the 1980s, using his Hollywood connections to create opportunities for minorities in the film industry. Brown believed athletes carried a duty that went deeper than symbolic gestures. He wanted real programs, initiatives that could actually change lives. His focus was on guiding young black men toward self-determination, respect, and financial independence. To Brown, they weren't just the future, they were the driving force of energy and change within the community. And through his programs, he aimed to channel that power into something lasting, something truly transformative. In the later years of his life, Jim Brown rarely appeared in the public eye, and when he did, the spotlight wasn't as bright as it once had been. One of his last widely talked about moments came in 2018 when he and rapper Kanye West visited the White House to meet with President Donald Trump. The meeting stirred plenty of controversy, as both men faced backlash for sitting down with such a polarizing figure. But Brown never wavered. For him, the meeting was about respect and dialogue. He believed that engaging with the president, any president, was an opportunity worth taking. Despite the critics and controversies, Jim Brown reflected on his life with pride. To him, it was a journey, marked by hard lessons, unforgettable moments, and the respect he fought to earn. Then in May 2023, At 87 years old, Brown passed away peacefully at his Los Angeles home, with his wife Monique by his side. She shared the news with the world, remembering him not just as the activist, actor, and football icon everyone knew, but as the man she loved, a devoted husband, father, and grandfather. Tributes poured in. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell praised Brown as not only an extraordinary athlete, but also a trailblazer who inspired athletes to take stands beyond the playing field. The Cleveland Browns organization remembered him as the face of their franchise, a man who helped shape their fan base and their history. The Pro Football Hall of Fame recalled how simply hearing his name commanded respect, with fellow Hall of Famers rising to applaud him. On the field, he was unlike anyone who had ever played before him. At 6'2" and 230 pounds, he combined size, speed, and ferocity in ways the game had never seen. Defenders rarely brought him down alone. He either bulldozed straight through them, stiff-armed them to the ground, or outran them entirely. He carried defenders on his back, found holes where none seemed to exist, and never took a play off. Even injured, he refused to sit out, stringing together 118 straight games without missing a start. Sam Huff, one of the toughest linebackers of his era, once admitted that the only way to deal with Brown was to hang on and wait for help. That was the type of player Jim Brown was: unstoppable, unrelenting, and unforgettable. To his fans, to his team, and to the league itself, Jim Brown wasn't just number 32 on the field. He was a force of nature, a true icon whose presence shaped the game forever.